help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Well, hello and welcome to the 40 Days for Life podcast. I am Steve Carlin, campaign director for 40 Days for Life, in for Sean Carney today on this, the pro-life podcast, which as always is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. We have a very important topic today, as Sean would say, and that is the myth of choice, unwanted abortions. New research showing that the majority of abortions are not something that women want. For all the talk that we have about a woman's right to choose, a right to a free choice, it turns out new data shows us that is not really the case. We're going to get into that, but first, I want to encourage you, U.S. residents, subscribe to the free quarterly Day 41 magazine. You can go to 40daysforlife.com/magazine. Free quarterly magazine. We've got some great stories coming out for you, and those stories include a wonderful tale about a 40 Days for Life leader who helped drive a woman hour-and-a-half round trip to reverse her chemical abortion. Also have a beautiful story about a 40 Days for Life leader who, for all the times we're out on the sidewalk and somebody drives by and says, how many unwanted babies have you adopted? Well, this mom adopted a so-called unwanted baby. She wanted that baby very much. And then also adopted the teenage birth mom. So you won't want to miss that. Get your subscription at 40daysforlife.com/magazine. And while Sean may not be here, he'll be back next week. I am joined by Ramona Trevino, the outreach director of 40 Days for Life. Ramona, how are you today?
I'm great.
Fantastic. And we're also joined by Heather Gardner, the director of campaign advancement and 40 Days for Life 365. Heather, how are you?
Excellent as well.
Pro-lifers who pray in front of abortion facilities at 40 Days for Life campaigns, we've long known that for all of the talk about choice, abortion is very rarely a matter of a choice a woman wants to exercise. You know, there's very few women that show up getting abortion because they're pro-Biden or they're anti-Trump or they want to take a stand for feminism, plant that flag. Usually abortion is driven by fear, anxiety, pressure, desperation, and we've got new research out of the Charlotte Lozier Institute, which really backs that up. Some really fascinating stuff. Peer-reviewed research from the Charlotte Lozier Institute that shows that about 2/3 of women who have had abortions did not want to have those abortions. And Ramona, I know we'll get into this a little bit more, but just as someone who managed a Planned Parenthood, that must have been something you were seeing kind of firsthand from the other side of the sidewalk.
Yeah. Well, being that it's a referral facility, I didn't see a lot of it, but for obviously we did see some of that. And I never like to sensationalize what I did at Planned Parenthood. I always want to be forthright and honest about what I saw. And then also, you know, we were 3 days a week. And not only just a referral facility, but we were only open 3 days a week. And we were in a very conservative part of the county as well. So, you know, there was a lot of women who came into our Planned Parenthood who chose life. But of course, there's the flip side to that, in which we saw a lot of women who didn't choose life as well. So
as we break down this data from the Charlotte Lozier Institute, I mean, forget about unwanted pregnancies. Most abortions are unwanted. Only 1/3 of the women surveyed indicated that they were, pleased with the decision to abort when they made it. And to me, that's not a surprise because there's nothing natural about abortion. There's nothing, when we hear about women who say they want abortions, there's sort of that line that people will say, like, they don't want abortion like they want an ice cream cone or they want a college scholarship. They want abortion as a means out of something they see as a trap. Heather, you've led the 40 Days for Life campaign for so many years in Austin. I mean, this is something we see on the sidewalks, isn't it? The women, as they walk in, there's not an enthusiasm for what they're about to go do.
No, and what I've said for many years, especially when I give like sidewalk counseling, sidewalk outreach trainings, is I don't want to say that there's never a woman that is skipping into an abortion facility, but it's very rare. And in my experience, I only ever saw that once. And this was a woman who, she was tall and thin, it looked like she could be a basketball player. and she was actually like mocking us on the sidewalk and then like skipping in, like, yeah, I'm so glad to be getting my abortion. And that's what the abortion industry, I think, wants us to believe about pretty much every woman, that I get to exercise my right to choose, and I'm so excited. And that's not reality. I mean, that's very rare that happens. And even with that woman behaving that way, I'm not going to be surprised if deep down she's actually just using that to make up for or hide,
compensating for something.
Compensate for.
It's like
for
the elementary
else.
school student who like fails the math test is like, well, I don't even want to succeed at math.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Or
So
this doesn't matter to me.
it's not uncommon to see sad, gloomy faces, to see them looking down to the ground, tears even at times. Like you, Ramona, I don't like sensationalizing things. I don't think we need to. We don't need to do that because abortion is horrifying and bad enough in and of itself. But we do see things like that where it's much more common, where women are sad and depressed. And it just makes you think, like, if this is such a great thing and such a wonderful right that we as women have, why is it that more of us aren't celebrating and acting all excited? Why isn't it that? Why don't they give free T-shirts after every abortion that says, I had an abortion, shout my abortion? They tried something similar to that before where they had those offered, and lo and behold, women don't want to brag and advertise that they've had abortions. They're not like super proud
They
of
weren't
them.
really bestsellers.
Yeah.
Ramona, you and I have spent many, many hours trying to keep a comprehensive database of all the abortion facilities in the country. And that work involves a lot of time on abortion facility websites to find out where are their locations, are they still open, all of those sorts of questions. And I'm sure you've seen, as I have, over and over again, the abortion facility websites, like they're headlined with this like graphic of like 3 women like frolicking through a meadow. Are they frolicking through the meadow on the way to they're going to get abortions together? I don't know. It's unclear, but it's kind of trying to sell it as like, hey, this is great. We're all getting our abortions. And in reality, so often the abortion is a matter of isolation. The women are there. Their boyfriends might drop them off. Maybe they walk in. The very reason that they're getting the abortions are because they don't have that support network. That's why we've seen so many 40 Days for Life campaigns have had success offering these moms baby showers. Because a baby shower, what happens at a baby shower? The people who love you and care about you gather and they shower you with gifts and they celebrate you and they celebrate their baby. And that becomes so effective, I think, because the support network that's normally going to throw you a baby shower is broken down. That's why the woman shows up at Planned Parenthood for the abortion. And when we can kind of fill that gap, it really takes away a lot of the motivation for these abortions that are otherwise unwanted.
Right. Yeah. To speak on what Heather was saying about women going in, she's never seen anyone other than except for the one exception. In the time that I worked for Planned Parenthood, I never saw any woman or any young girl who went in who was happy about her abortion decision. And in fact, I share this story often, which is the first abortion referral that I gave when I first started working for Planned Parenthood. And it was a college age woman. I always call them girls because for me at my age now, everyone's like a young girl to me. But, she was probably like 18 or 19 years old, and she came in with her boyfriend, and I think she already knew she was pregnant, and she wanted that confirmation and of course the referral. And, when I told her, yeah, you're pregnant. And the first thing she did was burst into tears, and she knew that she was wanting that abortion referral. And it wasn't this happy moment, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm going to, go get my abortion and this is my right. It was,
I always wondered what the day of my first abortion would be like.
Exactly. Yeah. And the father of her baby was with her, and I didn't want to assume that was the father of the baby, but, I turned to him and said, what do you think about this? Because at the time I'm like thinking, how do I get myself out of this? How do I wash my hands of this? Right. Yeah. And make this about her decision, so I'm not complicit in this in some way. And so, he was just like, I'm just here to support her, whatever she decides to do. And then she walked out in tears, after giving her this referral. And so there's never been a case in which I witnessed someone happy about making this choice.
And that's fascinating too, because if you look at it, the girl's walking away in tears, so she doesn't clearly want it, at least with any sort of enthusiasm. The boyfriend is just kind of like the loser who's, yeah, whatever. Fine by
I'm
me.
just here to support her. Yeah.
And then you didn't even want to sell it to them. And so nobody walks away from that transaction happy. It's just pure despair, fear, desperation,
Absolutely.
terror. So a third of them are wanted. What are the rest of the abortions? Where are they coming from? And a plurality of these abortions, 43%, are women who, it's not that they were being pressured into the abortion, but they reported later that the abortion was inconsistent with their values and their preferences. And to me, this is somewhat interesting because 43%, that's not far away from half of the women who get abortions. They're saying it's inconsistent with what they wanted. Okay, so we got the abortion, but it's not really what we would have preferred if we had had a choice. To me, this is where we see such an impact from people on the street doing 40 Days for Life, doing sidewalk outreach, and then ultimately getting those women into the pregnancy help centers where those 43% can find the help that they need to make a decision that is in line with their values and their preferences. And Heather, in spite of all of that, we see such a push from state governments and even at the federal level to restrict, regulate, crack down on, even close pregnancy help centers that are offering women a true choice.
Yeah, which is ridiculous, of course. And it does call to question, where's the real choice then if you are pro having a choice? If women can't go to a pregnancy center to get a free pregnancy test, ultrasound, some of these women's health clinics that are offering also STD testing, maybe even women's exams and prenatal care. It varies between, center to center, and then again, some of them being health clinics. So it's obvious that it's not about choice. It's about pushing abortion hardcore and eliminating the other choices for women.
Yeah.
I think there's a phrase for that. They call it the Hobson's choice, where you've got a choice, but it's only one choice. And okay, what choice do you really have?
Well, we know it's about making the word abortion more palatable for people to accept it. It's all about the euphemism of choice. I mean, we all know that there's no real choice here. And of course, having worked for Planned Parenthood, you know what it's about. It's about money. And so when women choose life, there's no money there, because they're not offering prenatal care to people. So, it's the only obvious choice when you walk into Planned Parenthood is abortion.
60% of the women who were surveyed said that they would prefer to have chosen life and would have done so if they had had more support or more financial security. Mm-hmm. I thought that was fairly interesting. I mean, that's a majority. And of course, if we are able to address these concerns, that doesn't end all the abortions. But if we figure in the United States 1 million abortions, give or take, every year, we're the wealthiest civilization that the world has ever seen. We've got the means and the resources and the finances to provide for every woman, child, and family in crisis. You could save 600,000 lives a year just by helping women access these pregnancy help resources. That's a dramatic number. And it's frustrating to see people trying to crack down on it. And it's frustrating that we're not maybe able to get more women over to those pregnancy help centers. But I think that this data, we talk about this podcast being designed to help end abortion where you live. This is information that helps you end abortion where you live because you can use it. You can go out there, you can do the sidewalk outreach. And we see we're not just reaching out to women who have deaf ears or even the boyfriends who have deaf ears they don't want to hear about. They're looking for us to be out there. And I think that's why we recently saw that 24,000th life saved that we know of during a 40 Days for Life campaign.
Praise God. Well, and I think it's important too for us to kind of break down what is, when we say 60%, that would have given birth if they'd only received more support. What do they mean by support? I'd like to know and break that down a little bit. What do they mean by support? Because, I was a teen mom and we weren't wealthy by any means. We were what you would probably say, we were kind of poor. But, when I became pregnant, abortion never crossed my mind because I had the support and I knew I had the support from my mom and dad when I told them that I wasn't afraid to tell them. I was only afraid in disappointing them, but I wasn't afraid that, my parents are going to kick me out. I'm not going to have anywhere to live, all of those things. And so it wasn't necessarily the financial concerns that were an issue. It was just knowing that I had two parents, despite whatever problems they had, who loved me and who were going to support me and provide that emotional support. So that to me is very telling. And I'd really love to break that down more and understand and grasp what kind of support are these women saying that they wish they'd had. And then also, are they looking for the support of the significant other, their partner? Did they experience that rejection initially? Is that what really was the driving force as well? Because there's that deep wounded feeling that you feel, because I was also told to have an abortion as well. And thankfully, I just dismissed that and was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But because I had my parents' support. So imagine these young women who don't have the partner support, they don't have the parental support. There's no one there to really empower them and show them we're going to be here for you and we're going to walk alongside of you. So I think that's what's so crucial about us being there as well.
Yeah, and that's what it is with these pregnancy help centers is they are often the only family that these women have. And many of them, if you talk to them, I know many of the ones that I've worked with and that we partner with over the years, they will say that they'll have the client testimonies where they'll say, this was my family. They took my hand and they walked this journey with me. And they didn't just give me handouts. They really empowered me. They helped me find a job, or they helped me, maybe they didn't graduate with a high school diploma, so they helped them get their GED. Or finish high school. They help them with all these kinds of things because they didn't have that support from their family. And a lot of times it's because they've come from a broken family themselves and they see how hard it is. And so when they're thinking about their baby and thinking about their baby's future, despite what people say, women are thinking about their baby when they're considering abortion because obviously logic doesn't follow through, but they're thinking it might be better to prevent their child from going through the hardships that maybe they're facing with a broken family, because if she doesn't have her boyfriend or her husband's support to have this child, then she's thinking, great, I'm going to be a single mom and this child's going to be without. And so it's more merciful.
That cycle
and it's continues. A continuous cycle. So.
And then too, Heather, oftentimes this is the pregnancy, those at the Pregnancy Resource Center, that's oftentimes the first place that they experience unconditional love.
Yeah.
And I can say that, as someone who was loved out of the abortion industry, I experienced that. That was the first time that I experienced not unconditional love, because I had that, but from strangers. And that was really surprising for me. That was, I would say, just the very instrumental in really coming to know Christ and seeing him embodied for the first time in people that I did not know. And so I think that's beautiful when you think about, what we are and what we represent out on the sidewalk for these women and those at the Pregnancy Resource Center, like you said, that oftentimes these are like they become family to these young women. So it's really beautiful what we offer the women out there, and it's very sad that we're painted in such a bad light.
So we've covered that just a third of abortions are wanted, 42% are inconsistent with a woman's preferences, and then that's dark, but darker yet is the nearly 1 in 4 abortions that are reported as unwanted or coerced, and that's a scary thing to hear about. And I think that we need to acknowledge the fact that there are women who are being pressured into it. There's sex trafficking. There's boyfriends who are going to kick the woman out. There's parents who are going to kick the woman out. There are women who are making this decision as a means of self-preservation than rather because it's something that empowers them.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that number is not higher. I would almost argue that wouldn't that be the case for all of them, for a good majority. Again, I've seen too much both inside of Planned Parenthood and outside of Planned Parenthood to have never come across a woman who felt like she was making this decision on her own. It was always someone who was kind of pressuring her.
And what types of individuals would they be? I kind of mentioned the boyfriend and the parents, but like, what are some concrete examples of what that looks like?
Well, when I was speaking earlier about the referral, the first referral I gave, the young woman there, I just remember her saying, I can't have this baby. My parents are going to kill me. I'm in college, that sort of thing. Like, so this pressure of, if I tell my parents that I'm, pregnant, there's going to be an issue with me being able to continue on with my education because obviously, her parents are providing that for her. And so then she was afraid, this would disrupt that. I remember very vividly too, a 15 or 16-year-old girl who had come into Planned Parenthood with her mom. And I think it was pretty obvious that she did not want the abortion. And her mother was a single mom. So can you imagine hearing that your mother was a single mom, so this is her daughter, right? And saying, I don't want my daughter to go through what I went through. So basically hearing your mom say, I regret you. You know what I mean? I didn't, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have had you because it was so difficult.
Well, often a lot of times it's the grandma of the baby, the mother of the woman who's pregnant, she's thinking about herself, and she's thinking, oh, I had to do this and I don't want to have to redo this because I'm done. I did that. And you're so young, her daughter is so young that she knows she would have to help raise this baby. And she's like, no, I'm done raising kids. And so it's more about her and preserving her, lifestyle rather than what's best for her daughter. And then obviously, like, she's wanting to kill her grandchild. She doesn't want to put that into
they're not
those
thinking
words.
about that at all. And it's sad because I remember this young girl was kind of like with her head down, and I can't remember the conversation. It's been so long ago, but I do remember, she kind of had her head down, and mom's like, oh no, this is something she's going to do. And I wondered, well, at that point I was kind of checked out at that point, like, whatever, do what you're going to do. But, I wonder now looking back in hindsight, is that something that she wanted, and how sad that she must have felt to think, I can't do this to my mom. My mom was a single mom. She raised me on her own. And then just feeling that sense of guilt, or even this obligation that she felt to her mom to just go through with the abortion. And that's heartbreaking to think about.
10 years ago, we all have these scenarios, I imagine, from our pro-life lives where there's the situation where we got involved and we were trying to make a difference, and we couldn't save the baby, and it haunts us. So I think we all have at least a handful of those that we can remember. And 10 years ago, I got involved in a situation where there was a high school senior. She was like early in the year, and she was pregnant and was kind of abortion-minded, and the sidewalk counselors were able to reach her and get her to the pregnancy center. Wonderful conversation. She looked like she was going to choose life. And then mom and dad stepped in, and they said, you need to get this abortion so you can have an enjoyable senior year and play basketball. And in the moment, that's a terrible thing. But now with some time elapsed, time has gone by. She is like 27 or 28 at this point. Any glories of throwing that ball through the circle have faded. They just don't, like, in your upper 20s, you don't care about your high school glories athletically anymore. Like, what difference does it make? Did she win state? Did she win conference? Did she score the winning basket? Like, who knows? Who cares? But we know that she is still feeling the impact of that decision that was made, not by her, but a decision that was made for her. And I think about that girl often, and it brings me pain. I don't know what she's up to. Haven't had the chance to stay in touch, but that is a heartbreaking scene that plays out over and over again.
I actually share a very, very similar story that happened about 4 years ago. And this is, after leaving Planned Parenthood. And, interestingly enough, I have more stories that have happened after leaving Planned Parenthood than while I was in Planned Parenthood. And very similar, high school senior. And she was pressured and coerced by the father, the grandparents. Mm-hmm. So the father of the baby's parents, who were in a position of really to intimidate and coerce her. And it was heartbreaking, and it still breaks my heart today. I mean, when I think about it, I literally cry about it. It's just, like you said, it's just gut-wrenching and heartbreaking.
Yeah, we had in Austin at the Central Texas Coalition for Life, we were on the sidewalk. This was during the summer, I think, or either right before or right after a break from summer. It was right around that time, and we encountered a young woman who was a sophomore at a college in another town over, and she had actually thought about getting an abortion and made an appointment, but then thankfully a friend of hers told her to go to a pregnancy center first to talk about her options. And so she did, and she saw the baby on the sonogram, and she chose life, and she was really excited. But then she went back to her dorm and told her parents. And next thing you know, she makes another abortion appointment, and this time she arrives. And so this is where we encounter her on the sidewalk, and we actually knew her story because it was actually some of the same people that were in the pregnancy center. And it was kind of a divine thing that happened where the person who talked to her in the pregnancy center happened to be on the sidewalk that morning. And thank God she ended up choosing life ultimately and gave birth to her baby. But she was at that abortion facility, had made that second appointment, and had attempted to go through it because when she told her parents, her mom said, if you don't have an abortion, we're taking away your car keys, we're taking away your money for your books, we are not paying for your college tuition, and we're not paying for your rent for your apartment. And so, and her cell phone, also taking away her cell phone. So this girl's entire livelihood is being taken away from her if she doesn't. I mean, if that's not coercion, I don't know what is. And that was what we could on the sidewalk then recognize, that this is clearly coercion. I mean, was someone, holding a gun to her head, walking her in the door? No. But mentally and emotionally, she was being coerced like no other to go get this abortion, and this was not her choice. Yeah.
So with that level of pressure, how did she end up making that heroic decision to choose life for her baby? Like, how did that go down?
It was because the sidewalk counselor recognized her as she was walking up those steps, and she called out her name. And so the girl turned around, surprised to hear her name, and then recognized her and ran into her arms and started crying. And this woman, who was also she had no idea that she had this abortion appointment that morning. So it's totally God designed that sidewalk counselor was there that morning. And this particular person, she and her husband have fostered over 80 children over the last 40 years. So she was willing to take this young woman into her home and told her so. Like, whatever it is that's being taken away from you, we will help you. We will surround you. We will help you. We'll help you pay for college. Like, we will gather this community support and do whatever we have to do so that you and your baby can be supported. And it was amazing. And what ended up happening was, thank God, like in many of these cases, the mother did eventually come around. But when she went to tell her father, because she actually told her mother and father separately. So when she went to tell her father, she was afraid the father was going to have the same reaction. And the father was super angry at the mother for not supporting the daughter. Wow. He had a totally different attitude and embraced her and said, we will do whatever it takes to help you have this baby and to support you. So she ended up getting that support eventually. But had the sidewalk counselor not been there that morning, I mean, she probably would have gone through that procedure that day.
How long ago was this?
It was 10 years ago.
So you think about what the last 10 years has probably looked like for that family, that mother/grandmother who wanted that child aborted. I mean, tea parties, it's the kindergarten, like grandparents' day, all of those wonderful moments that were almost gone. Thanks be to God for the folks that you guys had on the sidewalk there.
And she, it ended up being, there's just so many layers to this story, but she wrote a letter and shared her story, and it was shared, the letter was shared. She asked them to share it at that pregnancy center's banquet later that year.
The mom wrote it, or like the mom's mom?
Wrote the letter. The pregnant mom wrote the letter. And she basically wanted to say thank you to the pregnancy center, to the sidewalk counselors, and also to a radio station that had been praying for her anonymously, because of just, we don't know what's happening and she's under a lot of pressure right now. She said in this letter, you guys not only saved one life, you saved 2 lives, because as I was walking up those stairs that morning, I was contemplating how I was going to commit suicide after I had this abortion. Wow. And she said, so you saved my life and my child's life. And it's like, how amazing. Wow. How amazing is that? And that abortion facility would have done the abortion, would have gotten her money, and wouldn't have cared anything about her afterwards. They maybe would have done a phone call for, hey, make sure you come up to your follow-up appointment. And if she didn't, they wouldn't have cared. It doesn't matter.
No, I mean, I can attest to that. We had a woman who came in after she was post-abortive, and she came in for a follow-up, post-AB is what we call them, so post-abortion follow-up. And she was very depressed. She was obviously not happy about having made that choice. And, and this was a grown adult woman, probably in her late 20s, early 30s even. And very upset, very depressed about having had her abortion, was trying to turn for help at Planned Parenthood and at the surgical center, and no one was there to offer her anything. So she came to us, and I remember our nurse practitioner came out. She said, Ramona, do we have anything to offer this patient who's really struggling with her abortion? And I said, well, let me look. And so I, opened up our referral binder, and there's nothing there. We don't have anything.
You don't keep the Rachel's Vineyard brochures stocked at Planned Parenthood?
Yeah. It was in the Rolodex, right?
Oh my gosh.
And so I searched for something, and any type of mental health care or anything, and nothing. We had nothing. And so the nurse practitioner, went into her office and starts Googling and trying to find anything she could find for her. And turns out she did find something that was at a local church group, I guess for helping and healing, with post-abortive women. I don't know exactly or remember what it was called. So she sent her there, and then she said, here, put this in our referral binder to file away in case we need it again. And so later on down the road, we are getting prepared for an audit. And one of our administrators is down, like looking through all of our things, and she finds that. And then she calls me out on it. And she's like, what is this? And I told her. And she's like, oh, no. She pulls it out, grabs it, crumbles it up, and throws it in the trash.
Trust women.
Yeah.
Trust women. Yeah. That actually reminds me of a funny story. So I was praying outside of one of our facilities in Austin with a friend of mine, Jennifer. And this new abortion worker came up to us and was trying to convince us that we didn't need to be there because they actually have options for women. Like they'll refer them for other things if they want. This wasn't a Planned Parenthood, but they'll refer women to, other things, that they have all kinds of things. And I said, oh, really? And she wanted to know what we were handing out. So I gave her our brochure and she was like, yeah, maybe we can keep that. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, she mentioned adoption and she mentioned other things. And I thought to myself, you are so obviously new. Like you're about to get fired if you try to put these other referrals in your repertoire to give to women. And I was like, it's so sweet how naive you are, right? Like that's what was going through my head. But she thought that we were super naive and that by her sweetly talking to us that she could actually convince us that to leave because, oh, you guys have options that you're giving to women. Oh, okay. Well, we'll just be on our way then, know? So when I kind of got a little bit, I mean, I was pretty, I'm sure, sarcastic. I was like, that's interesting. And you think we're just going to leave, huh? And so I said, we've been around for a while and we're not actually going away. So I was like trying to match her sweetness, but with that little hint of sarcasm. Well, she eventually got like kind of ticked off. And so next thing I know, we're like saying hi to her. We see her every week and we're saying hi to her. And there was one time where there was this storm that blew in and this huge branch was in the parking lot and it was blocking a lot of the spaces. So she comes out to move this branch and I'm, good morning, how are you today? And she just looked at me and I knew her name because she accidentally told me her name. So I called out to her, and she just was mad and ignored it. She just thought she could sweet talk us into leaving. And I thought how funny that was. Now I am happy to say, thank God she's a quitter.
Oh,
so she eventually came out and then she wanted to meet me and the other sidewalk counselor again, and personally, she wanted to apologize to us. And so I apologized to her too, because I was like, I mean, I wasn't probably the nicest. I was a little bit sarcastic, and I was like, but we're praying for you, and we're so happy to see you on the other side of the fence. And she was just so grateful to be out of that industry after that. So
these are beautiful stories, and I can't help but to think about that you're out there, and this beautiful story of that girl who is saved from the forced abortion by her parents, and this beautiful story about this worker who leaves her job, and then the car drives back and says, another car drives by and says, quit shaming women.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Get a life. I'm like, thank you.
Don't you have a job?
Ramona, you talked about the resources for post-abortion healing and how Planned Parenthood just literally crumpled them up
no matter what, right?
Threw them away. Yeah. Every now and again, every couple of years, particularly when abortion is in the headlines in unflattering ways, we see the mainstream media come out with these reports saying, "Oh, new study shows that 99% of women don't regret their abortions." That to me, this sounds kind of like, did you hear Kim Jong-un and Saddam Hussein were reelected by like 99% of the vote? Like that's like nothing
exactly.
You couldn't get 99% of people in America to agree that the sky is blue. You just couldn't. Well,
Right.
Sometimes there's a tornado and it looks a little bit green. Like, okay, guy. But 99% of women agree that their abortions were the right decision. And there's one study that's been parroted over and over again by the media. It's back from 2015, and it had this 99% line. But if you break it down, you find out it's not really that simple. They're like, yes, 99% apparently in some form said that they were glad they had the abortions, but there's also about half of them say that they had regrets of some form regarding how the abortion went down. About 2/3, up to 3/4 actually, said they felt sadness about their abortions. More than half felt guilty about their abortions. Many of them, not a majority, but around 1/3 or a little more than 1/3, said that they were angry about having had the abortion. And this is interesting to me because this data doesn't line up. And how do you explain it? I think some of it is you look at the sample size and there's a lot of bias in polls if you are not getting an accurate cross section of the population. If you do a survey of people who regret their abortions, you're going to get a survey that says people regret their abortions. If you've got a survey that says women love their abortions, and it's because the sample was all women who are happy they had abortions, these things can really taint the data that you get. And in fact, if you take a look at this particular study that is so often touted by the mainstream media, fewer than a third of those who were invited to respond to that survey and to that ongoing research participated. Fewer than a third. And so those other 2/3, maybe they were the women who weren't quite so eager to talk about their abortion experience.
They weren't wearing the Shout Your Abortion t-shirt. How about that?
Right. Well, and then also you take into consideration how long it even takes them to come to terms with their abortion.
Yeah.
On average 10 years. And so they could have been very well included in this group where, what abortion? I didn't have an abortion. They've suppressed that. So they haven't even come to terms with the fact that they've had an abortion.
If you conduct the interview 6 months later, there's still a shell shock element to it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And of these fewer than a third who participated in the study, more than half of them, even after that, more than half dropped out before the study was completed. You contrast that, the Charlotte Lozier Institute study that we're talking about, that shows that only a third of abortions were truly wanted, 91% completion rate. So I think we're dealing with better data here. I want to get into the question of when we talk about these coerced abortions, we've had a couple of examples, but what do they look like and how do we respond on the sidewalk? I get a lot of calls from 40 Days for Life volunteers saying, hey, we're out there and we think this is like a sex trafficker bringing this woman in, or stories where there's grab the wrist and you can tell the woman isn't really happy to be there and she's kind of walking along, but there's a tight grip on her wrist as she's led in, usually by a man who wants her to abort the baby. How do we recognize those signs of coercion when they're maybe not that obvious, and what can we do about it?
Right.
There's limited things we can do. I mean, it varies. I mean, a lot of these, you have coerced versus forced. And when we think of forced, we tend to think of physical, someone's physically being dragged in. You're not going to see that as often. We did see that in Austin many years ago. There was actually a 16-year-old girl who did not want to have an abortion. And the volunteers, thank God there were volunteers praying outside this facility. And this facility, you could see the parking lot from the sidewalk. And the mother of the girl was physically dragging her daughter in. She had skinned up knees and elbows. So she's dragging her across the asphalt, and the daughter slips away and runs over to the prayer volunteers and verbally says, I don't want to do this. My mom's making me do this. And so you call the police, right? I mean, that's obvious. That's actually against Roe versus Wade, which abortion advocates never wanted to admit at the time, that it also gives the mom the right to choose life. And so regardless of her age. And so that was a situation also, again, where the mom did eventually come around. She was in the hospital when the baby was born, and she was thanking the sidewalk counselors. But it took a while, and that was a more obvious form. But there's other forms where I know with, talking with various attorneys over the years and trying to get advice, and also with law enforcement, there's only so much they can do. So when in doubt, I mean, we can call the police and we can say, this is what we've witnessed. We think that someone's being forced into this. And so, depending on your police department and the city you live in, if they can actually have enough officers to respond, they would go there, they would go inside the facility, and they would question the workers and say, we have reason to believe that there is a young woman here that is being forced. If that is the case, you guys basically need to cease and desist. You need to stop, and we need to escort her out of here so that she is not forced to do this. But then what if she's already in the back room?
Right.
The officer cannot go in the back room if there is a surgery or some sort of procedure for HIPAA or whatever the reasons they're going to claim, right? And so unless he's hearing something and he's got enough reason to actively go and bust into a room, but he has to just basically tell them and threaten them with not legal action, but threaten them with some sort of violation, arrest, something like that if they're forcing a girl to go through this against her will. But it's a lot of times not going to be that obvious to us. And so I think the best thing we can do in those situations, I know we were talking about this earlier, is Just be observant, write down the description of the person who you think is the perpetrator and the woman who's the victim here. If you have the license plate information, that's probably the best that you can do. You can't go onto the property and grab the girl. I mean, we just can't do that. I guess it'd be different if it's like, it's your niece or something and her boyfriend's there and then you run over there and try to save your niece. I don't know. But I mean, we certainly, you can speak to this more, Steve. What would you say? Like we have to choose then. We don't want to break our statement of peace and cross the property line. Is that going to serve anybody if we're in that dilemma where there's somebody
Right.
there?
You'd have to be pretty clear what's going on
Yeah.
and have no other recourse, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's suspicion, right?
Yeah.
We don't know for sure. It's not as dramatic. Like I have never encountered a woman with skinned knees who is telling me, I don't want this. I've had women say that they don't want to. I've seen women who are saying they're being forced, but at the end of the day, like they walk in with their 2 feet. It's a sort of it's like the non-violent force in many cases, or the threat of violence that is sort of implicit
True.
rather than
Yeah.
explicit.
Yeah.
You know what the number one cause of death among pregnant women is? Homicide.
Yes. I have heard that. I've heard that stat before.
Yeah.
It's really, really sad.
So it's difficult. It takes a lot of nuance, a lot of parsing, a lot of judgment, and but I think what you said, Heather, is right. If there is a woman who's being forced and you've got reason to believe, report it to law enforcement. Like you see the flyers all over regarding human trafficking, terrorism, everything. If you see something, say something. To me, I think that's it. If you see something, say something. The police can always ignore it. I've had that experience. I've talked about on the podcast before how I was one time there, and there was an adult bringing in a teenager underage for an abortion. I reported it. The police ended up saying like, "Oh, are you a mandatory reporter?" I don't know. I don't really know who is or who isn't, but what I do know is I saw a crime taking place and I'm calling to report it. It turns out that Planned Parenthood in our state law in Wisconsin, sexual health providers have a unique exemption from reporting child abuse.
Oh, that's wonderful. It makes total sense.
Yeah, so there was nothing we could do, but we tried, and there was some
Wow.
awareness that came out of it. We got some media out of it, and hopefully somewhere down the line it saved someone from trouble. But I think we've got a big challenge coming down the line with this proliferation of abortion pills.
Yeah.
And whether it's Walgreens and CVS, whether it's the telemed abortions, the mail order abortions, the proliferation of doctors who are prescribing abortion pills to women who aren't pregnant for when they might need it for a rainy day. We've got abortion pills that are coming over illegally black market through websites that are unlicensed or across borders. All of those sorts of things. Our communities are being flooded with abortion pills. And if this is bad news for women with wanted pregnancies, we've got a few stories here. This is just a sampling of them. A Florida man switched the label on a bottle of antibiotics, tricking his pregnant girlfriend into ingesting an abortion drug, which induced an unwanted abortion. An Arlington, Virginia doctor put an abortion pill in his girlfriend's tea, killing their baby at 17 weeks. A Wisconsin man slipped mifepristone into his girlfriend's smoothie. She became suspicious and had the beverage tested, revealing an abortion drug. The perpetrator fled the country before being arrested a decade later. A Japanese man was charged after he told his teenage girlfriend that he might have infected her with a sexually transmitted disease and gave her abortion pills under the guise that they were meant to treat the feigned infection. A 15-month investigation led to the arrest of a New York man charged with administering mifepristone to a pregnant woman without her knowledge, inducing an abortion. A Texas man was indicted after his wife accused him of lecturing her on the importance of hydration during pregnancy and giving her a glass of water that was mixed with the abortion pill contents mixed into it. The husband tried to claim that the water was cloudy due to dirty pipes.
There's your choice. Women's rights, women's choice, except not.
It's only going to get worse if we continue to pump these pills into our community. I mean, I've got some criticism actually for it, but we were kind of sounding the alarm that some of these pharmacies that are now involved in abortion were involved in massive lawsuits regarding the proliferation of the painkillers, the prescription drug crisis that we have, opioids, massive settlements, and apparently haven't learned anything about flooding communities with drugs that are dangerous and deadly.
Yeah, the abortion pills too are being sold as safer than Tylenol. I mean, we are here. That is one of their biggest talking points right now. They being the pro-abortion progressive media, the industry, the pro-abortion industry, and it's been debunked, and it's obvious that this is not safer than I mean, it's so obvious based on what it does. If you saw the movie Unplanned, for instance, that was Abby's experience of a chemical abortion. When asked about it, Abby said that was a very accurate depiction of what she went through during her abortion procedure, her chemical abortion. And that not only that, but that is actually something similar to what the women who came into the very building that we are in now, the former Planned Parenthood building from Abby Johnson's Planned Parenthood, that was very similar to their description. And not only that, but after the heartbeat law was enacted in Texas, there was a lot of push for the abortion pill all over campus and all over the state in different areas. And what I saw was actually some online reviews of women who had had the abortion pill, seeing these ads, some of them saying they were still pro-choice, but that this was not an accurate depiction the way that these abortion pill pushers were putting it out there, that there was no way that it was safer than Tylenol, and that they felt like there was multiple women coming forward and saying, I felt like I was going to die. It was so awful. And I've not had like a whole bunch of people that I know, let alone one, say, yeah, when I took Tylenol for my headache, I thought I was going to die, because it was that's the impact that it had on their bodies. And I'm not here to say, Tylenol is like 100% safe or anything like that. I'm, of course, not here to say that. But I know for sure, especially with the debunked figures that have come out showing such that Tylenol is not safer than the abortion pills. And so I think that if women were to just see or read these experiences by other women, they would think twice. And I know that former abortion workers have come forward saying the same thing, that when they were in the facility, one thing that bothered them was women coming back angry at them or calling them angry at them. You didn't tell me it was like this. You told me it was going to be maybe like a heavy period, maybe like the flu at the worst. And you did not say I was going to almost hemorrhage or hemorrhage, maybe almost die. You didn't say I was going to be passing, and I know this is graphic, but passing blood clots, the size of lemons. You didn't say that I was going to see my baby, and that's not like a one-time story. These are common stories that happen. And so just watching all of these reports online, I screenshotted all this too, because I think one of the places I saw it was Reddit, which is a dumpster fire of all kinds of stuff, right? And Reddit certainly doesn't want to have information like that. That's against any abortion at all. And so I screenshotted these as I was seeing these conversations and these threads of these women coming forward and saying this. And again, several of them felt like they had to still say, well, I'm still pro-choice. Like they weren't ready to say I'm against, abortion, I'm pro-life, but their experience was so bad that they were mad at the abortion industry for lying to them.
Yep.
Well,
definitely presents a whole new challenge for us.
Yeah, and I think my message to the world is, if you are a woman with a wanted pregnancy and your boyfriend, your husband, your whoever doesn't want you to have that baby, you better keep an eye on whatever it is you're drinking, because we just a sampling of those stories shows that it's now easy to get that poison. And once you've got it out there, you don't know what's going to happen with it.
And people are stockpiling it, like they're saying they're stockpiling the abortion pill just in case. And you don't know where these pills are coming from sometimes. There's websites you can get them from. Maybe they're going to be laced with something else. Yeah. There could be all kinds of fentanyl deaths related to abortion pills.
And reading this is news to me. My mind didn't even go there. And so now that I've read this, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a whole another level, another layer to this issue that I didn't even imagine before.
It is, and it's not new. Like I think you had read in here.
It's new to me.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
But for the audience, like this, it's in fact one of these stories that Steve read a decade ago that this happened. So these things have been happening for a while, but of course they're going to be that much more common now because they're being pushed, and there's this underground market, for the abortion pills, no prescription, whatever. And these so-called women's advocates are pushing for women to get these things. They're not even it's no longer safe and legal. It doesn't matter. It just has to be accessible. It's not safe, legal, and accessible. It's just accessible. And it just shows you that all along this has been all about being pro-abortion and not pro-woman.
So that's some heavy stuff.
Yep.
We got to look at where, let's end on the hopeful note. To me, this means that the prayer and the public witness, whether it's in front of an abortion facility, a Walgreens, the public square,
Yes.
more important than ever and can make a bigger impact than ever.
Absolutely.
And educating people. Yeah.
I think it's always worth sharing that number that we love to share, that the former abortion workers report that when there is somebody out praying in front of an abortion facility, the no-show rate for those abortion appointments can go up to as high as 75%. And that can help those women in particular, those ones in that 42%, the plurality that say, I chose it, but I wasn't happy about it.
Yeah, and that 75% statistic, in case you need a reminder, comes directly from Planned Parenthood. So when, and again, if you saw the unplanned film, Abby mentions that in the film, but that was actually one of the first things she told us when we had her come into our office that day 13 years ago. 14 years ago? I'm losing count now. It's amazing. But basically that when she went to her last Planned Parenthood convention, there was a breakout session labeled How to Deal with Anti-Choice Protesters. And that was their own numbers that they were coming out saying that the no-show rate rises. And that was really surprising and still is surprising for a lot of people because we don't necessarily see the fruits of our labor. We don't have their abortion appointment booklet, so we don't know how many names are on there, of course, but we don't know how many people are driving by and then just keep driving that were maybe going to go, but then they were looking for that sign from God. So be the sign from God that a woman may be looking for. Even if you're not a trained sidewalk counselor, you can use our sidewalk outreach training that we have. It's really great. It's online available. But you can also be that prayer volunteer and be that physical sign of love and mercy and hope.
You mentioned we don't always see the results and can't sort of prove from our lived experience that 75% number, but we get all these anecdotes that bear out that fact. And we had a wonderful story this past campaign from Southern California where a woman who participates in 40 Days for Life invited a friend to join her at the vigil. The friend said yes. And when they got to the vigil, the friend said, I came here abortion-minded 13 years ago, and it was the same 40 Days for Life vigil that she now participates in saved her baby. So thanks be to God. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Jesus.
And those stories never get old.
They never get old. No. And I love that because we talk about saving babies, but those babies, many of them are now toddlers, children, preteens, teenagers. Before long, many of them will be adults. And that is a great gift and a great joy, and it is a great consolation and encouragement to us, especially as we head into the next 40 Days for Life campaign. Begins, of all days, on Valentine's Day, February 14th. We expect it will be, once again, the largest spring 40 Days for Life campaign ever. We're here in Texas. I'm from the Midwest. I don't call it a spring campaign. I call it a Lent campaign because we all know it takes place during winter. But it shows, I think, that our efforts are more important than ever and that they can save lives. So I want to encourage everyone in between campaigns here, stay active, continue to go out and pray, but get ready and discern whether the Lord is calling you to help empower a woman in your community with real options, real health care, real choice. Those 60% of women that say, I probably would have had the baby if I had the encouragement that I needed or the financial support. You can be the bridge to that financial security or to that support, whatever it is. So pray, discern, get involved in that campaign. And I want to thank you, Ramona. Thanks for your insights, particularly having been on both sides of the both sides of the fence, as we call it. And thank you, Heather, for sharing just the beautiful story. I'm very moved and touched by the report of that woman whose parents were about to force her into abortion and said, yeah, we'll pay for everything. We'll help you get through college. That is incredible. And thank you to all the listeners. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next week. In the meantime, please rate, review, and share this podcast. And we will look forward to Sean being back next week on the 40 Days for Life podcast. God bless you.